Okay, my friends. Good to see everyone here for a little Torah study. Before we begin, I'm sure many of you heard the news. There was a school shooting today, outside of San Antonio, Texas. And
Terrible.
so it's a terrible tragedy. It's still unfolding. We're going to learn a lot more, obviously, in the coming hours and days, with that elementary school. And so we're just going to keep everyone in our prayers and just, it's a moment of great sadness, a great pain. We don't know, how these things keep happening, but it's just really a terrible tragedy that I wish we as a country would find a way of trying to stop these perhaps a little harder. This is we've had over 200 mass shootings in this country since January 1st. So the year is not even 200 days old. And we have had over 200 and I think it's 212 mass shootings. And so we just hope and pray for better days. We hope that our, leadership in our government finally begins to actually work on this, in a real way, maybe find some solutions so I don't have to keep coming back, week after week, month after month to mourn, these terrible tragedies. So sorry to start off on a little bit of a bummer, but it's, it's a hard day, once again. A hard day in a time of too many hard days. So with that said, we're going to jump into a little Bible study, and sort of see what our sacred text has to tell us today, and maybe find some consolation or some messages. A little tough for the Torah part because it's all about laws, laws and rules. We had our 10 commandments last week, and now we have all the other laws, not all the other laws, but a lot of laws this week. It's actually the Torah portion is called Mishpatim, which means rules, which means laws. Tyler, we're on chapter 21 in Exodus. Let's start together with the blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, as we busy ourselves with text. Sharon,
Yes.
you want to start off here? These are the rules.
These are the rules that you shall set before them. When you acquire a Hebrew slave, that person shall serve 6 years and shall go free in the 7th year without payment. If a male slave came single, he shall leave single. If he had a wife, his wife shall leave with him. If his master gave him a wife, and she has borne him children, the wife and her children shall belong to the master, and he shall leave alone. But if the slave declares, I love my master and my wife and children, I do not wish to go free, his master shall take him before God. He shall be brought to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall then remain his master's slave for life. That's
Thank
terrible.
you so much. Yes. So,
That's
as I
terrible.
said, sort of starting off with a bummer as well. The Hebrew Bible, as I think we all know, but if not, here's our first example, does not have an issue with slavery. You would think for a people just freed from slavery that we wouldn't have this issue, but yet a couple of chapters sort of in past the Exodus, we have rules about slavery. As hard as it might be to believe, the good news is that there are actual rules, right? Because that is a step in a positive direction, again, to our modern day 21st century, eyes and ears and minds. It doesn't really strike us very well, but I think that, again, we have to sort of give, at least partial credit, so to speak, for them to actually think about a system that doesn't keep people in perpetual slavery, perhaps. There might be a way sort of out of it. It's not, again, it's a concerning piece to the extent that we know the damages of slavery, for the Israelite people through all their time in Egypt. And here we have right away, by the way, if you happen to get a slave, and you notice it's a Hebrew slave, that's something that they put in. So the idea would be that if somebody, falls into financial distress, hardship, that they don't really have a word for indentured servant, but that's more akin to what this is at this point. They sort of work off their debt, they work off what they owe, and then eventually they are freed, with the very specific injunction here that it's only 6 years. Only, he says, it's 6 years, but the 7th year they go free. It's Shemitah. It's the year where everyone goes sort of free from their debts, and so they get to sort of leave then. Of course, there's this tricky stuff with the family. That if he's single, he leaves single. If he has a wife, he leaves with the wife. But if during their servitude, the slave owner becomes a matchmaker, and creates this, creates a family, basically, the wife and children don't leave, which one can imagine the emotional pain and trauma that would cause, leading to the slave likely saying, hey, maybe I'll stick around and be with my wife and be with my family. Make sense?
No.
No?
No.
No.
I agree with Karen.
Worse. And it gets worse. If he wants to stay with his wife and children, then they stick out, something, and they tag him and say, now you're mine forever. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I didn't say it was great. I just said that, it was a little bit of comparative progress. I will hardly be one to defend this text because it is 3,000 years old, and they had a different kind of society than they have today, and so I'm not going to approve it.
This is only for Hebrew slaves. So if you're a Midianite or whatever, we can beat the hell out of you, and it's okay.
Probably that's going to come later, though.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where that comes in, because I think them taking in non-Hebrew slaves was less common. But that being said, I don't have all my slave laws in my head right now, but I can't imagine it would be particularly great either, to be fair. Though again, I'm not sure how different it is than these laws. I'd have to, I'm sure we'll hit it sometime in the next few weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, where we get the case of the Midianite, Ishmaelite, Canaanite slave.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry,
It
gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
Sharon, give me a little more depressing stuff here.
When a parent sells a daughter as a slave, she shall not go free as other slaves do. If she proves to be displeasing to her master, who designated her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He shall not have the right to sell her to outsiders, since he broke faith with her. And if the master designated her for a son, he shall deal with her as is the practice with free maidens. If he takes another into the household as his wife, he must not withhold from this one her food, her clothing, or her conjugal rights. If he fails her in these 3 ways, she shall go free without payment. Oh my.
Yeah.
So again, not recommending it, certainly. We shouldn't try to sell our children into slavery. But in this case, if this does happen, there's a legal system here that is designed, again, this is not puppies and rainbows, but it is designed to offer her some measure of protection, that you can't be resold, somewhere else, and that there is a pathway to redemption for her to be free.
Without payment. She has no money. Where's she going?
It's a good question where she's going. That being said, but that can be said for, frankly, any single woman 3,000 years ago. That it wasn't like there was bursting opportunities for women in this time period. And so I think it would be free to go, and perhaps free to remarry, free to find another sort of. But again, not saying it's easy. This is a rough road, to be sure. at this point, because if she, was seen as married before, it's a little hard to get remarried in Israelite time. Again, not that there was really marriage. Let's again be clear on the terminology. But yeah, Leah.
It's interesting that they say her conjugal rights
Yeah.
as opposed to his conjugal rights. Her
Yeah.
conjugal rights,
Yeah.
wasn't she forced into this in the first place?
Mhm.
Well, yes. But even in the Talmudic times and in medieval thought, and frankly, even in ketubas, there is a sense that, not a sense, there is a understanding from a halachic, from a legal standpoint, that it is the woman who has the conjugal rights, not the man. That if a man fails to, getting R-rated already today, and it's a little early, if a man fails to perform his husbandly duties with his wife, that's actually grounds for divorce. And that can't be refused, that she has the ability to terminate the marriage if he is not providing for her needs in that way. In fact, there's a whole section of the Talmud that says, based on your profession, how often you are obligated to engage in sexual intercourse with your spouse. And that was not the same for everybody. If you're somebody who spends your time, as a tradesman at sea, for example, you can't be expected to be home to, have your conjugal visits with your spouse in the same way. Whereas if you're working at home, from home, if you're doing other less physically arduous tasks, you're expected to, to have, conjugal relations more often.
No comment.
Sexually progressive, such as it is. Again, I want to be clear. I don't want to paint this as like, yay, look how great. But, but there are in some ways where the Israelites and frankly Jewish tradition were a few steps forward, at least comparatively to some of their peers.
So could she deny him?
Supposedly.
Deny him. I think this would then get to be displeasing to her master, so to speak.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking.
I'm saying in this scenario, I was speaking more broadly, of course, but in this scenario where she is being sold, in this way, I think it would be harder, yes, for her to refuse. But it was also something where, and this comes later on in the Torah, that like when he makes the purchase, so to speak, God, this is so yucky. So when he makes the purchase, that she is to be afforded the rights and privileges of a spouse. That's what they're trying to say here. So like, even though the courtship, so to speak, look, a lot of us here were, in our lives, we were married, right? At some point. What do we wear in our finger?
Ring.
The ring. Where do you think that comes from? It comes from this, that you're being acquired, you're being purchased, and this is the bride price, is the ring. We have modernized it, obviously, but even in an Orthodox wedding today, only the bride gets a ring. Because the bride is the one, it's kinyan, the bride is the one being acquired. And the groom will get it, the day after, or, after the ceremony. But in an Orthodox wedding, it's the groom is purchasing the bride. We just don't say it because it sounds disgusting, because it is. So that's why we don't say it. And we say, with this ring, you treasure each other above all material possessions, and its perfect roundness is a symbol that life is a circle, and whatever, and we do that instead of saying he just bought you for, jewelers and bought you, for the price of the ring.
What, Rabbi?
Yeah.
At first, like as you're telling us that at least there's a some kind of set of rules. When you think about it, as far as slavery in our country, so many years ago, so you can see the comparison that this at least they try to make some sense and give some protection. Just look what happened in our country with slavery.
Yeah, they're
There's
trying to.
no,
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
telling you it's the best. I'm just telling you that from a comparative level, they were
right,
trying to make some strides forward.
right.
And if he was getting married to another wife, he couldn't just like dump her on the, with the trash in the morning. Like there
Mhm.
was rules to protect her, and if he didn't abide by them, she got to go free. Now, again, Karen rightly said, to where?
Yeah.
And that's a very reasonable question, in terms of what came next for someone in her situation. And I doubt there were a ton of good ends. And it's hard to go back to mom and dad, say, hey, you remember me? You sold me for a couple donkeys and, an ox. Do I still have my room? And that's probably not the best conversation that's going to happen. And so again, like where they'd go afterwards, I'm not sure. But I think trying to find another relationship, unfortunately, would probably be the best one.
Thank you.
No, thank you. It's a really good question. Okay. Now we're doing some more laws here, getting back to how we govern a society. Linda White, do you want to pick up there? One who fatally?
One who fatally strikes another party shall be put to death. If a man did so, but not by design, it came about by an act of God. I will assign you a place to which you can flee. When one party schemes against another and kills through treachery, you shall take that person from my very altar to be put to death. One who strikes one's father or mother shall be put to death. One who kidnaps another party, whether having sold or still holding the victim, shall be put to death. One who insults one's father or mother shall
Oh, we're in trouble.
Yeah. So we got a lot here, as we can see. It starts off pretty clearly, about murder, right? We had that already, you shall not murder. And now it gives you the penalty for such an act. However, now we have manslaughter, right? If it happened by accident or not by design, if there's a scuffle, and someone falls and hits their head and it's clear that wasn't the intended act, or even more so if there was literally just an accident that happens, there's a different punishment, it's a different consequence. But obviously if there was what's it called? Beyond intentional, if it's like pre-planned, if something that was really, thank you, a premeditated murder, that one, for that person, you can take them from the very altar. They could be clutching, onto the altar. You can drag him off and kill him, because he has no sanctuary. There's no safety for that person. Then we get to some dicier territory. You can't smack around mom or dad, because the punishment for that is death. Kidnapping, death, and everyone's favorite, giving a little back chatter, a little back talk, could get you stoned back then. One would question probably how much this actually did take place back in the day, where if you called your father a name or something, it wasn't like get him to the gallows, get him to the stoning circle. Probably was not as enforceable as that. I think it would have to be a little bit more than just, you doofus, look what he said, time to, everyone get your heaviest stones. It's stoning day. It's probably not that, if that makes any of us feel better. It's as good a time as any to mention that while the Torah, without a doubt, has no trouble with enforcing, enacting a death penalty, that later rabbinic Judaism, frankly, not so much later, this is still first, second, third century, the rabbis make it pretty hard to carry out a death sentence. The amount of evidence that would have to be attained before one can do a death penalty case is pretty pretty high, that you literally have to have two eyewitnesses to the crime. And, even the most ineffectual murderer probably knows that it's best to do it while no one's looking. And so to find two eyewitnesses and to go through the entire thing that they need to do to enact the death penalty was pretty tricky. You don't have that in the same way in the Torah, at least, as they don't make it as complicated. As we're going to see, there is a little bit of complicated stuff that gets thrown in a little later, but for the most part, it doesn't give us much mitigating circumstance. That if X happens, then Y happens.
Did they just bring up sanctuary in the beginning?
Yeah. I think more as a metaphor, but that idea that in this case of premeditated homicide, that even if the person was clinging on to the horns of the altar, it doesn't matter. There's no respite, for this person. There's no quarter is given. And so he is able to be dragged off the altar and ended. So you have this idea that if you're perhaps in this sacred space, it's not a place to do any killing. Sanctuary until not so much. Okay. We're gonna get into a little boxing here, a little fighting. Linda, want to give me one more here? When two parties
quarrel and one strikes the other with stone or fist, and the victim does not die but has to take to bed, if that victim then gets up and walks outdoors upon a staff, the assailant shall go unpunished, except for paying for the idleness and the cure.
Okay, so if you and someone get a little feisty and there's a little bit of punching and kicking going on, it happens, whatever. And if you sort of give him a good clap on the cough, as we used to say, and you sort of hit him on the head, and he has to, miss a day of work, you have to pay for that, right? You have to pay for his medical, whatever he needs medically. And for missing a day of work, you got to sort of have him made whole, so to speak, because he's okay. And there is an understanding, though I'm not sure how that would be with a stone, but there's an understanding that, God forbid you get into a fist fight with somebody, right? The belief is that in that kind of altercation, in that kind of scuffle, murderous intent is not a given. It happens. You're mad at somebody, and maybe you start throwing hands, but the idea is that because you're unarmed, so to speak, that you're not trying to kill somebody, in that moment. I feel like with a stone, it's, a little bit harder to make that point, but that idea that if you don't have a weapon in your hand, you're not intending to kill somebody. If you do have a weapon in your hand, there is assumed intent that you are going to do it with lethal intent in mind. Or else why would you have the stick? Why would you have the whatever it is? Oh, that feels a little close to home today. Okay, Leah, you want to pick up here? When a slave-owning party?
When a slave-owning party strikes a slave, male or female, with a rod, who dies there and then, this must be avenged. But if the victim survives a day or two, this is not to be avenged, since the one is the other's property.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, let's unpack that one first, because we got enough trouble already over here. Enough problems with this text. So there's, I think, this idea of heat of the moment and almost really violent killing. So if I have a rod, that I'm using to chastise a slave, that rod might be used for that purpose, but not to hurt, not to kill somebody. However, if I strike someone hard enough with that rod to kill them, that means I had some kind of murderous intent, to do so. And so if I just literally whacked you with something, And like that's enough. Like that's, even though it's a slave, that's a murder at that point, because that was, hit someone that hard with whatever you have in your hand to kill them, that counts. Here it's like if you thrashed them in such a way that was not seen. God, I hate all of this. In such a way that it was not lethal, you thought at the time, but like 2 days later they die. You don't have the same problem. Like, well, I didn't mean to kill him. I just sort of wanted to give him a little, whatever. We got to move on. I'm not explaining these texts any more than I have to. That's okay. Now we get to one of the most important texts here that we have when it comes to modern times and the abortion debate. A lot of Jewish law stems from this actual next verse. So Leah, you want to go ahead with us?
Yeah, I want you to, can you read this?
Yeah, I was going to say, like it's very appropriate given the shirt that you're wearing.
Yeah. When two or more parties fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, but no other damage ensues, the one responsible shall be fined according as the woman's husband may exact, the payment to be based on reckoning.
Yeah, on sort of a judgment, that comes later. So the issue is this. Two people are fighting and they cause, the pregnant woman near them, and they cause a miscarriage because one of them bumps them, right? It says here, what's the payment? The payment is monetary, right? There's some kind of fine levied, pain and suffering, for the woman who has miscarried, that there's a financial settlement that is made, with some hand wringing. What it does not say is that after the miscarriage, the person who bumped into the pregnant woman is put to death. And that's a very big difference, because as we learned a few verses ago, the penalty for taking a life is a life, right? And so if you murder somebody, you are put to death. So in the Bible denies personhood, denies that same status of a fetus in this case, because if the miscarriage results, then it's just a monetary fine, because it is still the woman's property, right? So she has property damage, so to speak. That something that was hers is now no longer hers, and there has to be a financial settlement, because of this. But the person who is responsible for whatever physical altercations that have happened is not put to death, because it is not a life yet. And so a lot of Jewish law about abortion stems from this part of the Torah. Not all of it, but some of it stems from this part of the Torah. Feels appropriate to mention. Yeah. And so and Leah, you can keep going. Here, Leah, if you want to unmute.
Oh, I should keep going?
Yeah, a little more.
Okay.
Yeah,
But if other damage ensues, the property shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. When a slave-owning party strikes the eye of a slave, male or female, and destroys it, that person shall let the slave go free on account of the eye. If the owner knocks out a tooth of the slave, male or female, that person shall let the slave go on account of the tooth. When an ox gores a man or woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox is not to be punished.
Okay, so that was a lot there. And so we have here the eye for eye, tooth for tooth, etc., etc. Later, rabbinic sourcing will say that this is really about financial compensation, as it goes on to the next paragraph, the next part here, that if the eye is destroyed, right, like if the slave owning party injures the eye of the slave, then you don't pluck out the slave owner's eye. The compensation, so to speak, is that they lose the slave. The slave is allowed to go free, right? So that's the consequence. Same thing even for a tooth, even. But for a tooth, it's the same sort of issue. Which again, I know some of this is icky, but it differentiates from other forms of slavery where you can do whatever the hell you want, and it doesn't matter. Here, if you knock out, a tooth, then the slave is free. Not the issue of knocking out people's teeth, but I'm just saying that in the grand scheme here, that if you lose a bicuspid, and you go free, it's not a bad deal all the way around, as opposed to like indefinite slavery. So maybe someone has to start your apple, but aside from that, like, you'll be all right. So.
We still do this. The AMA puts out a set of guidelines called Guides to the Evaluation of Permanent Impairment.
Yeah.
And the insurance industry uses them as
yeah.
should say if you lose a tooth or you lose a finger or you lose a toe, a whole hand, an arm, how much that you should be compensated.
Yeah. What is your part, so to speak? That's disturbing, but true. Yes.
It's true. We kept them in the library.
Yep. And then we move on to the next subject here, the ox that gores, everyone's favorite. Everyone loves the ox that gores because it's so relevant to today's society. And it is in its way. It actually is somewhat relevant. We'll get to it in a second, but but the very literal part of it, obviously, it feels weird that like none of us own an ox, right? But the idea is if the ox gores, somebody, and I'm the owner of the ox, I can't control the ox. Like the ox might be a jerk, and like might be whatever it is. Oxen do what oxen do, right? And so it might gore somebody or gore an animal or whatever it is. Then you kill the ox, put the ox to death. And you don't eat the flesh, bad ox, you don't ingest that food. And the owner of the ox doesn't get punished. But Karen, you want to pick up here with the ritual goring ox.
If, however, that ox has been in the habit of goring, we haven't killed them already, and its owner, though warned, has failed to guard it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner too shall be put to death. If ransom is imposed, the owner must pay whatever is imposed to redeem the owner's own life. So too, if it gores a minor, male or female, its owner shall be dealt with according to the same rule.
So if your ox sucks, and is goring people left and right, you have a responsibility to control it. You have a responsibility to guard it. Because if it does it once, you can say, but if it does it twice, and of course, the idea, Karen, you had mentioned it, that it can gore not fatally. It can gore and hurt somebody. You don't have to put it to death then. But if it gores and injures 3 or 4 people, whatever it is, and the next time it gores, it kills somebody, then that's on the owner. You should know what you have. Yeah. And then there's a ransom issue, perhaps. And, if there's a financial opportunity there, sometimes it does work. But the same if it gores a minor, same deal, male or female. There is such a thing as responsible ox ownership. And that if you own an ox, you have a responsibility to the community to make sure that your ox is safely guarded and cannot get accessed in different ways where it might hurt somebody. So responsible ox ownership, very important.
And you have to stone the ox, like it understands.
You have to stone the ox. Well, but the ox and the owner, right? Because the owner bears a responsibility to the community to make sure that their ox and its weapons of destruction, i.e. its horns, do not run amok everywhere and hurt somebody.
So then do you eat the ox?
No.
I don't, but that being said, can't speak for others. But no, I don't think we eat the ox. Leah, you have a question?
Is this true for other animals?
Yes.
Would this be true today for a car?
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, more like a car.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, we don't have ox hanging around, but it would be our car.
Yeah, it would be our, I mean, you could take it into a lot of different directions, but you are not prohibited, mostly, from owning dangerous animals in Jewish law. It's not seen as the best decision, depending on what the animal is, but you can own, but then again, you have a responsibility. People usually draw the parallel to the pit bulls. It's sort of like the angry, sort of dogs that have a habit of, hurting people. That if you're a dog owner and your dog is known to be aggressive, you got to keep that dog on a leash. You have to take, other measures so the dog doesn't maul somebody. And if it has been in the habit of mauling and you still let it do its thing, and it God forbid, seriously injures or kills another person or a kid or whatever it might be, you're responsible as that dog owner. The dog's going to be put to death. The dog's going to be put to sleep, as they say. But the owner is going to bear some liability, as well, for not doing the right thing. And yes, it does come into gun ownership as well. It's the same sort of idea. With a dangerous animal, I should say, or the ox. You can own an ox, but it's your responsibility to make sure it doesn't hurt anybody. If you're a gun owner, you have a responsibility to make sure that you have gun safety and, that you're able to keep it out of the reach of people who might grab it and use it. There is a responsibility here. So, this text, again, amongst others, have been used, unfortunately, too often on days like today, amongst other texts that talk about, our communal responsibility. What do we owe each other, right? What is our obligation to our friends and family and neighbors? And so, this, and we're going to see in a few more, texts today, this idea that there is a sense of the communal wheel, that you might have a right to do something, so to speak, but if it goes south, if it goes the other way, you are also responsible. You can't have rights without responsibility. A lot of the sense of, communal obligation. So, you could have an ox, and we can have 10 oxen. If you're a rich person, you can have as many oxen as you want, but you got to take care of it. And if you don't, there's going to be a penalty. There's going to be a consequence. Even with a slave here, there's, a responsibility. Karen, you want to pick up here again about the ox scores?
But if the ox scores a slave, male or female, it's to be the owner shall pay 30 shekels of silver to the master, and the ox shall be stoned.
They're not the exact same.
He doesn't understand why he's being stoned.
It's a bad ox.
For the ox, I'm sorry.
Bad ox.
All right. When any party opens a pit, or when any party digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or an ass falls into it, the one responsible for the pit must make restitution, paying the price to the owner, but keeping the dead animal.
Yeah, you can keep the dead ox, after it falls and cracks its skull.
Okay.
That one you can fry up on the grill. That's okay. Oxtails, not kosher, but delicious. With that,
wait. Ox are not kosher, right?
Yeah, they are.
No, ox are fine. It's just parts of the ox.
Okay, that's what I was checking. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Parts of the ox. I don't think one eats ox often because isn't that like tougher meat? I don't know. I mean, it's just like I don't know.
It's not something I know a lot about.
Yeah, I've never seen ox on a menu. But yes. So again, it goes back to communal responsibility, back to the pit. So like you can dig a hole, but if you leave the hole uncovered and someone hurts themselves, in this case the animal, you owe money for the animal. These things aren't cheap. These are farming animals. These are workhorses. Work oxen. Whatever it is, guiding the plows. And so if there's got to be a financial price if you accidentally kill one of these things or injure them. You have a responsibility. Okay. Yeah, about keeping the dead animal. Okay, Gary, you want to pick up here?
We're still
Okay.
working on oxes.
More ox.
When any party's ox injures a neighbor's ox and it dies, they shall sell the live ox and divide its price. They shall also divide the dead animal. If, however, it is known that the ox was in the habit of goring and its owner has failed to guard it, that person must restore ox for ox, but shall keep the dead animal. When any party steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, that person shall pay 5 oxen for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep.
I don't know where they get the calculation from before you ask, but that is the idea. That, if you steal an ox, you owe them 5 ox. If you steal a sheep, you owe them 4 sheep. I don't know why. It's 4 versus.
I'm sure it's the equivalent of that AMA guide. They had a guidebook that.
Yeah, they have a book that to tell you what everything is worth. Again, 5 oxen, a lot of oxen, and so it's a deterrent, for theft, right? Because if you steal an ox and all you have to do is to return another ox, that's not as much of a deterrent than having to pay 5 ox for 1 ox or 4 sheep for 1 sheep. I see all this livestock going on here. Okay, sheep. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Okay.
Now we're the people.
No, now we're at but we're still stealing livestock here. Gary, you want to give me a little more if the thief is seized?
Okay. If the thief is seized while tunneling and beaten to death, there is no blood guilt in that case. If the sun had already risen, there is blood guilt in that case. The thief must make restitution, and if lacking the means, shall be sold for the theft. But if what was stolen, whether an ox or ass or sheep, is found alive and in hand, that person shall pay double.
Yeah. So this is one of those fun parts of Jewish law here. So let's say you're a thief and it's nighttime and you're tunneling, underneath the house, try to pop up and steal something. In that moment of darkness and fear and terror, you can wallop that person to death, and that's okay because he's a thief. Stand your ground laws. Okay, yeah. You can take care of him, and that's all right. However, if this is happening and you don't do it, then you lost your opportunity. Because once the sun rises and you can see him, and the terror isn't the same, and it isn't in the moment, the heat of the moment, but you decide to, whack him with a shovel a few hundred times, when the sun has risen and you can see what's going on, then that's not good. You can't do that. Then you actually just murdered him, and there's no mitigating circumstance. If you don't bludgeon him to death, but he tries to steal something, you can make restitution. And then here's another example. He can be sold into slavery. If he can't make restitution for what he stole, he can be sold, and that's how you get another Hebrew slave. But if whatever he tried to steal, you find it and it's okay, then instead of paying 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, just pay double. Not as bad. Whatever it is. I don't know what makes this different than the other one, but apparently it's different. Then instead of paying 5 times for the ox, here you're paying double for the ox.
If you had any money, you wouldn't have stolen it in the first place.
Oh, and that's why I hear to that. In fact, it's found alive. Like that's the difference. That's found alive. You can just give it back, and one more. But yes, the idea that probably if you were to live it high in the hog, no pun intended, you wouldn't need to steal so much. Or maybe you just enjoy thieving and enjoy stealing. Kleptomania existed even back then. Okay, Gary, give me a little more. When any party?
Okay. When any party who owns livestock lets it loose to graze in another's land and so allows a field or vineyard to be grazed bare, restitution must be made for the impairment of that field or vineyard. When a fire is started and spreads to thorns so that stacked, standing, or growing grain is consumed, the one who started the fire must make restitution.
Pretty straightforward, right? If my ox are grazing on your land, I have to pay you money because my ox ate all your stuff. That's why boundary markers were very important, right? That you had to be able to mark what is your land, what someone else's land is, and it was a crime to move someone's boundary marker. So here we have the idea that there's clear boundaries. There's a fence, even if it's a metaphorical fence or an invisible fence, so to speak. Like you have to know where your land is, and then you say, and of course, even worse case scenario than the ox and the sheep that are eating your food. We have the fire issue that if you start a fire and you burn someone else's field down, you got to pay it back.
Insurance.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Insurance did not exactly cover back then, I guess. Okay, Barbara, you want to pick up here with any party?
When any party gives money or goods to another for safekeeping, and they are stolen from that other party's house, if caught, the thief shall pay double. If the thief is not caught, the owner of the house shall depose before God and deny laying hands on the other's property. In all charges of misappropriation pertaining to an ox, an ass, a sheep, a garment, or any other loss, whereof one party alleges this is it, the case of both parties shall come before God. But one whom God declares guilty shall pay double to the other.
So the idea is we have a court system, right? You have to be able to have some kind of legal system here that we have to go before God, i.e., well, it is God, but but to go before obviously the priests and prophets, and there's going to be a trial, and you're going to find some way of finding out the guilty party. Okay, Barbara, give me one more.
When any party gives to another an ass, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to guard, and it dies or is injured or is carried off, with no witness about, an oath before Adonai shall decide between the two of them that the one has not laid hands on the property of the other. The owner must acquiesce, and no restitution shall be made. But if the animal was stolen from the guardian, restitution shall be made to its owner. If it was torn by beasts, the guardian shall bring it as evidence, not needing to replace what has been torn by beasts.
Yeah, and so here we have, again, I let you borrow something, of mine. I give you, my iPhone for safekeeping, and then when I come to get it back, I don't know where it is, it's lost. Like that's a problem, and there has to be a conversation here about how that happened and who's responsible. Like, is the person who I lent it to responsible for whatever happens to my phone or my whatever property I have here? We go back to the animals, right? And so, if I have a donkey and I give it to you for safekeeping and it's gone the next day because somebody stole it, you should have guarded my donkey better. So you owe me, for that. I'm taking a loss here, and you should have guarded it better. But if it was ripped up by other animals and it was torn up, you can't control that in the same way, so as long as you can provide the dead animal's body parts to the court, then you're okay. You don't have to pay it back. Lovely. You recognize, this part of your donkey? This used to be its, leg, thigh. Yeah, that was Fred. Yeah, no, it's gross. It's gross. Okay. Tyler, you want to pick up
Sure.
there? When any party?
When a man gives money or goods to another for safekeeping, and they were stolen from the man's house, if the thief is caught, he shall pay double.
I think we're a little further down.
On a man.
When any party borrows, you did that.
When a man gives to another an ass, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to guard, and it dies or is injured or is carried off, with no witness about, an oath before the Lord shall decide between the two of them that the one that has not laid hands on the property of the other owner must acquiesce, and no restitution shall be made.
Yeah, let me see. Pass it on over. So I think you're a little high. I think. Let's see. A lot of this is the same. It sounds very similar. Oh my goodness. Yeah, 13 over here.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
13.
13. So I'll have the numbers up here.
13. When a man borrows an animal from another and it dies or is injured, its owner not being with it, he must make restitution. If its owner was with it, no restitution need be made. But if it was hired, he is entitled to the hire.
Yeah, so entitled to the money if you're borrowing, you know. So if I'm loaning you and there's a monetary transaction, then there has to be some restitution. So again, like it's all about property and how we treat each other. Oh my goodness, let's go for a little more R-rated before we're done today, Tyler.
If a man seduces a virgin for whom the bride price has not been paid and lies with her, he must make her his wife by payment of a bride price. If her father refuses to give her to him, he must still weigh out silver in accordance with the bride price for virgins.
Okay, so that's lovely. So the idea here is that if you have the Don Juan here, there is a seduction, however we're going to define that, and there's a little, it's interesting here about how much consent there is even in this conversation, because it doesn't, the word seduces doesn't have as tricky, that can be read as maybe less harmful than other things, I'll put it that way, but whatever happens here and there is sexual activity, and the virgin is no longer a virgin, then the father of the bride, the father of this young woman, is entitled to some payment, in some way. So either they get married, mazel tov, again, a great way to start a relationship and a long, happy life together, right? Again, remember, when we talk about the sanctity of marriage, right? Like this is it, right? So we have here the biblical sanctity of marriage. We have basically a marriage being created by sex, because again, it's money, it's the financial transaction, sex or contract, oath, those are the three ways. You got married back then, one got married back then. And so here we have the combination, right? That there has to be, so sex has occurred, and now you're married, mazel tov. And here's, some silver. The father can, of course, say, "You're not getting married. I'm not going to give you give you my daughter." And there's still some silver that is then traded in as well. So some money, whatever the bride price might be, whatever the good market value is, fair market value. Again, gross. So not what you want, so to speak, in any way, shape, or form. I'm not sure if there's much more I can say on that gives it a positive spin. I think that's, again, just sort of goes into that too. That is what it is, and trying to find some kind of like protection here, but it's a stretch. It's a stretch to find much there that you can say, "Yay, this works out great," because obviously the woman's voice is muted in this. There's no like, "Well, I love him, Daddy," or "Don't make me marry him," whatever. That's not there, right? Like we don't know what this is. This is a one night stand that becomes a wedding. Becomes a marriage. And we don't have a sense of her intent, her ideas, her position in all of this. It's the man and it's the father, that are controlling the woman's fate in this situation, which is, again, not great, as we can all guess. Not what you want. Okay, speaking of women who need to die, Tyler, give me one more.
You shall not tolerate a sorceress. Whoever lies with a beast shall be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to a god other than the Lord alone shall be proscribed. You shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Okay, so we got sort of a few in a row here. Sorcery, not great. So I mean, it's a short sentence in Hebrew, short sentence in English. There isn't much there. No witchcraft, easy enough. And by not tolerate, yeah, we're killing her. That's that's the next thing. You can't have witches, pagan things running around in Israelite society, because that would, of course, influence other people to engage in such things. So you can't have these sorceresses among you. Bestiality was not tolerated. I think we can be okay with that. In terms of all the problems to have. Bestiality is not a thing. So in terms of being something tolerated here, whether or not that's the death penalty, obviously one can debate, but in this case it is. Say again, Karen?
Well, it says in the next one, sacrifices to God be proscribed. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's just another way of saying that you're killed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's not gonna end well. Idol worship sort of leads you to the death penalty again.
So we're stoning everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody, so get stoned. I think I know that song.
Oh my goodness. And finally we get at least a happier, or at least a more positive note here. That a lot of this stuff, and again, we can obviously disagree with some of the different laws and how they were created, or again, not see them as the most progressive for our times. But I think this last sentence is again meant to sort of sum it up, that a lot of these laws are saying, do not wrong or oppress a stranger. Like do not, you have to be careful in how you act. Don't, be unjust. Because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And so I think that's sort of meant to put a little bit of a bow tie, not a bow tie, a ribbon on some of this, and just be more general. Don't do the wrong thing, when it comes to the people in your community, the people you consider neighbors and the people you consider strangers. Yeah, Karen?
What it tells me is that all these things that stoning the ox and whatever, that was common sense at the time. That's what it sounds like. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
It
with
wasn't
you.
anything new or different. It was common sense.
Yeah, I think it was like an expectation, and I think that I'd like to think that they knew enough at that time to build up other legal systems, and like sort of this was their shot. This is, and it made sense, as you said. My rabbinical thesis plays upon some of this theme as well. It wasn't about this per se, but again, thematically, some of it was there. That why do we make rules in society? Like, why do we make them? Because people are doing them. Like, people are doing the wrong thing. So you don't have to make a law if no one's doing it. Because it's common sense they wouldn't be doing it. Whatever it is. But if you have to make a law, it means that it was happening. It means that was something that was occurring in society in some way, whether it was your society or whether it was Canaanite society or whether it was Moabite society, Jebusite society. Like these things were happening. So they said, no, you can't do this. You can do that, but you can't do this. This is in bounds. This is out of bounds. It's a sort of a sociological argument, right? That we need these laws to help govern a society, and these laws that we're putting in are things that we actually see, day to day, week to week, month to month. And because it's a problem, and it's a problem that is recurring, we need a law. You don't have to worry about tolerating a sorceress unless you're tolerating a sorceress, somewhere. Hey, she's being tolerated, go get her. It's like, that's what you see here, with the ox that gores and people falling into pits and people getting into slap fights about animals. You hurt my donkey, well, you hurt my cow, you owe me money, you owe me money. Like, you have to have some kind of system that is able to sort out all of these squabbles, or else you're going to have anarchy.
And plus, Rabbi, it also lets the community know that there are consequences.
There are
It's like-
consequences,
Right.
exactly right. And it goes again back to how we treat each other. How do we build community? How do we build society? And if we're coming from a place of communal obligation, that we have an obligation to our neighbors and our friends to protect them, wouldn't it be nice if perhaps some of our laws could be passed that would have that intent in mind?
Yeah, let me ask a question.
Definitely.
I have a couple of questions
Yeah.
about sorceress. So it doesn't say sorcerer.
Yeah, we'll get to him later, maybe.
Okay. Well, also, is mysticism, Kabbalah, considered sorcery?
No.
No, it's just what they believe, but they didn't do anything to change what was there.
No, Kabbalah, is that again that mystical theology, that it's rooted in Jewish tradition. So it's not. It can be seen certainly esoteric, and something that is perhaps not normative tradition, but that was almost by definition what it was supposed to be, is non-normative. But you wouldn't have rabbis,
Mixing up
getting some those grills. Like in fact, there are other examples one can give about magical practices being done, in Jewish tradition, and the rabbis sort of shrugging their shoulders. It's like, we don't love it, but it's happening, and why am I going to fight it? I'm trying to think of an example. I have one in my head, but I'm trying to think of a different example. Because I don't like that. I don't like that example. But it's, I don't know. I feel like anything else where it's like, a rabbi might go, well, I don't love X, but X is a reality. And so if I'm sitting there yelling about it or whatever it is, this makes me look out of touch, out of the loop. So I have to find some way to live with it. I mean, like a liturgical example that I hate to go back to, but it's Kol Nidre. Like the rabbis hated Kol Nidre. Like they didn't want it anywhere near the liturgy, because they thought the message was terrible. It's like asking God to forgive sins that we haven't even done yet, or to release us from all of our promises that we make. What's the point of making a promise if we're asking God to release, from the promise? But it was there already, and it had a catchy tune. And people liked it, and so what are you going to say? You kids with your darn spiritual music, get this cello out of my house. It's like, no, it's done already. It's already happened. So you interpret it differently, and you find ways to live with it and go, oh, it really means this, or it can mean that. And, it's okay. I love Kol Nidre, and it's fine. Gary, you have a question? You got to unmute.
I was just wondering, these were used and interpreted, and I'm just suddenly thinking, we're having a problem with our Constitution, with Supreme Court suddenly, or maybe not so suddenly, deciding that you can't interpret things based, as they are now on the Constitution. It's like with Alito and abortion. All of a sudden now he's saying, well, the Constitution didn't say that. Well, it didn't say that women could vote, or even most men could vote either.
There is on the Venn diagram between constitutional originalists and evangelicals, there's not a lot of space. It's all overlap. It's all the same circle, so to speak. And progressives, both in terms of how they view constitutional law and how they view the Bible and religious tradition, again, there's a lot of overlap between those theological positions and philosophical, ideological, political positions that either we're progressive or evolving and changing and meeting the needs of the community, or we're saying that something written 300 years ago or 3,000 years ago, that we have to make sure that we don't stray from it, whatever that means. because again, I would argue that Alito's interpretation of the Constitution misses the interpretation of the scripture, right? If he's one that wants to base it on biblical law, we just said, Exodus is pretty clear that a fetus is not a life, in the same way. And by imposing his own understanding of his religious beliefs and the Constitution, perhaps he's depriving rights of other people.
Right.
Who does not interpret their religion that way he interprets his religion. So it is lovely. And then we're going to see it again, obviously, today on the other issue, and what does the Second Amendment really say? And, the Second Amendment was written in a time where you were firing muskets. And you can shoot one person and it'll take you, a minute and a half to reload. The founders did not anticipate people with AR-15s and body armor
Right.
going to a school.
Right.
I don't think the founders would have had that vision, and I think they would be mortified. But then again,
Maybe not.
founders had their things too, so
Yeah.
they'd be mortified at women voting, probably. So, again, how much the founders' opinion actually care about is probably minimal, because they've been dead and I'm still here. I'm going to be worried about the people who are alive. None of this stuff matters for George Washington because he's dead, and Jefferson is as well. So I'm going to worry about today's people and what impacts us, not perhaps what they thought about 250 years ago, much less 3,000 years ago. I'm going to take the good from it, but I'm not going to necessarily live my life by the exact measures of 1776 or 1000 BC. Take the good and fix the bad. Shouldn't be that complicated, but apparently it's a little complicated.
You can't legislate common sense. That doesn't work.
It would be nice if we could legislate something, frankly.
Yeah.
I'd like to legislate anything.
Anything.
A little legislation that made sense in any part of our country would be great. But
You live in Florida, not happening.
yeah, we got a lot of time. Well, we've had too many examples, unfortunately, and we just know that as frustrating and as hopeless as it feels, it's again why we have to continued activism, continued advocacy, and to do the work. And and who knows, doesn't change tomorrow. I can't imagine, frankly, that it hasn't changed some of this stuff. It's beyond me. I'm someone with at least a modicum of intelligence, and it's beyond me, frankly, how we're still having the same arguments that we've been having before. I would have lost money after, God, it's so tragic that I can't even think of which one because there've been so many. But I'm guessing it was Sandy Hook. When was Sandy Hook?
Yes.
About 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah, I would have lost money after Sandy Hook. That was the one where I said that. I mean, this has to change now, right? Like, there's no way we could look at this and go,
Columbine or any of the rest of it. We're all in school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm saying Sandy Hook
big.
is one that broke me a little bit more than others. I just felt like that was the one where I was like, this has to be fixed now, right? Like they're really gonna get some work done. And it turns out I was wrong on that one.
On all of them.
Well, there's a group that I joined tonight, Moms Demand Action Tampa Bay. I joined it immediately and they asked me, are you willing to volunteer? I said, with COVID, there's certain things that I probably wouldn't volunteer for, but I'll make calls, send out mail or anything else that you suggest. I mean, after this today, I just felt like, gotta do something for future generations. It's just terrible. So however I can help, I hope it works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all we can do right now is again get active and do what we can do, because it's a very unbelievably painful day, and again a time of way too many. Again, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. There are times when it just feels like we have a vigil every week, for something that has gone wrong. And that's eventually a burnout scenario anyway. But I'm just saying, but like
Hamster on a wheel.
this week it was this, last week it was Buffalo. Who knows what the week brings? Hopefully better news. I'll put it that way. Hopefully better news.
Not yet.
Not yet, but hopefully better. And like we have to keep working for it, I guess. We have to just keep on sort of pulling forward, for the day where we have some successes. And that's the whole thing. It's determination, and it's hard as heck to do in these moments. To talk about that, I'll lift that up. I'm not trying to be Pollyanna-ish over here. I'm just saying that, as frustrating and as terrible as these days are, we have to just keep on trying to push ahead and push forward with it, even on days like today where we don't want to, because it just feels really just overwhelmingly upsetting. But we keep doing the work. Okay, my friends, have a good night.
Thank you,
and
Rabbi.
I'll see you all sooner than later. Next week, I believe, is actually our last one until summer breaks out. So, because Shavuot is the week after, and we have our adult B'nai Mitzvah coming right up.
Yes.
So,
Excellent.
I will see you all Friday, except for my adult B'nai Mitzvah students, who I'm going to see on Thursday.